See that small church on top of the hill? Here it is. And those two shots are taken with the same lens.
What's good, guys? Today we're checking out one of the best lenses for traveling. And when I say traveling, I mean it. Let's go.
Tamron 28-200mm f2.8 f5.6 is a perfect lens for traveling and hands down the best super zoom lens I've ever used. Me and my wife Katusha rented this lens and took it to our crazy trip to Oslo, Rome and Nice, France, so I could fully test its capabilities in the field. Don't forget that it's a full frame lens, and considering its cost and weight, I would say Tamron did an amazing job in this exclusive Sony E-Mount lens. Let me show you. Let's start off with the size and weight. At 28mm, it has nearly the same size as my Tamron 17-28 f2.8 lens, and it's pretty compact, to be fair. Of course, when you zoom into 200mm, it's becoming much larger, but still relatively compact and manageable for 200mm lens. And it weighs only 575 grams, which is very lightweight for such a range of focal length. And of course, it doesn't have any image stabilization built into the lens, otherwise it would be much heavier. Just as a reference point, Tamron 28-75 f2.8 G2 lens weighs only 35 grams lighter. Wow! In the kit you'll get front and back caps as well as a plastic lens hood. They're all pretty solid and the plastic is rather sturdy. The build quality and materials of recent Tamron lenses really makes me happy. Of course it's still plastic, but a very high quality plastic. The focus and zoom rings are smooth and well dampened. Zooming in and out is really easy and pleasing. Also it has a lock at 28mm, so the barrel of the lens wouldn't extend while it's in the bag. Tamron 28-200mm has metal lens mount and a thin weather sealing gasket, and overall this lens is claimed to be dust and moisture resistant, but considering the barrel is kind of made out of several parts, I do not recommend shooting with it in a heavy rain or very dusty environments. It also comes with rather small and popular 67mm filter thread, and almost all Tamron lenses for Sony E-Mount have the same, which is very convenient. Let's talk image quality, sharpness and vignette at different focal length. Remember that this lens has not constant aperture and it closes down while you're zooming in. Here is a nice chart for you. At 28mm wide open, we see quite strong vignette in the corners of the image, and it mostly goes away by f4. The corner sharpness at f2.8 is also not the greatest, but strongly improves by f4, f5.6. The middle looks decently sharp at f2.8 and amazingly sharp starting from f4. Now let's zoom in to 50mm. Our brightest aperture at this point is 3.5, and we still see some heavy vignetting in the corners, but when we stop down just a bit to f4, it almost goes away completely. The corner sharpness is still good at almost all apertures, and the center sharpness at f3.5 is a tiny bit worse than at f4. At 100mm, f4.5 is the minimum aperture, and the vignette is not that bad compared to f5.6, but f8 looks much better. The corner sharpness is still the best at f8, but f4.5 and 5.6 also look acceptable. Same story with the center sharpness. And finally, at 200mm, our minimum aperture is only 5.6, the vignette is visible and completely goes away by f8, the corner sharpness is a bit worse than expected at 5.6 and 6.3, but I don't think that extreme corner sharpness is that important at 200mm, especially while doing portraits. Center sharpness, on the other hand, is good at 5.6, better at 6.3 and excellent at f8. In terms of distortion, this lens has it all, from pincushion to barrel distortion. But it's really well controlled by the in-camera corrections, and it's not that strong, so I highly recommend you to keep the in-camera corrections turned on. But overall, the distortion shouldn't become an issue for you. And what really impressed me is that this lens projects minimal focus breathing both at 28mm and even at 200mm, which is a very welcome addition for videographers. In terms of chromatic aberrations, there are some wide open, but since this lens is not that fast already, they appear not too often, and they are not that strong. Fast and reliable autofocus system is crucial for a good travel zoom lens, because nobody wants to see their vacation photos with missed focus afterwards. So I've tested it a lot, for instance in this 4K 100 frames a second shot with eye tracking, or this guy passing by on a bicycle, also the focus is spot on. Overall, I used the autofocus at 95% of the time with my Sony a7S III camera and had absolutely no issues both in video and stills. Speaking of stills, they look pretty cool, especially at 200mm, but you can get some outstanding shots with wider focal length like 50mm or 28mm. Tamron 28-200mm lens has 7-bladed aperture, which leads to a bit busy bokeh during daylight, but overall it looks pleasing and smooth. Let's have a look at the bokeh circles more precisely. At 28mm f2.8 we see a bit of texture inside of those circles and slight onion shape towards the corners, but already from f4 we see not perfect circular shape due to only 7 blades in aperture. And by 5.6 we start to see real corners. Zooming all the way into 200mm, the texture is now more pronounced, but for f5.6 those circles look quite round and lose circular shape only by f11, f20. One more really impressive thing is the absence of coma smearing on this lens. This is by no means a lens for shooting the night sky, but if you want to, you'll be more than fine shooting wide open at any focal length. But the sun stars look average though. Flaring is a weaker point of this lens. You do get a lot of color in those flares, there is a loss in contrast, and overall it's easy to catch a flare with this lens. So I do recommend keeping the lens hood on when possible. The minimum focus distance is only 19 cm. That's a very nice performance for such a lens, and it can easily provide you with kind of a macro shots with 0.32x magnification. Keep in mind though that for the best sharpness and contrast you need to stop down the lens at least a full stop. And finally, the price. Right now Tamron 28-200mm f2.8 5.6 retails for only $650, which is not that expensive considering the quality and the features of this lens. And also the lack of competition in this price point with similar parameters. It is worth every dollar in my opinion. To conclude, I'm more than satisfied with this lens. Keep in mind guys, there is no magic. It is still a bit tight on wider end, and I wish it was at least 24mm. It still has no built-in image stabilization, it still has a changeable aperture, which is not that convenient and it needs more light. The corner sharpness and vignette wide open and flare performance could have been better, but if all of those wishes came true, it would end up costing at least 3 times more and being 2 times larger and heavier. On the other hand, for the reasonable price, you get light, compact, sharp lens with outstanding versatility and reach, almost no focus breathing, great minimal focusing distance, reliable autofocus, and in the end of the day it's mostly for travelers and super run-and-gun stuff. So I wouldn't ask for more from it. So what do you think guys? Have you used this lens, and what other options do you consider for your traveling needs? Feel free to write down all of your thoughts down in the comments. If you did enjoy this video, please smash the like and subscribe buttons and the notifications bell. Here are a couple of videos for you to watch next, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care, bye.